Welcome to Aging in Recovery. I'm Gil Cintron, licensed master social worker and founder of Never Alone Home Care Services, Incorporated. Over the past few months, I've been discussing the concepts of aging in recovery and the aging in recovery residential model, or ARM, A-R-R-M. As I continued developing these ideas, I also began conducting more extensive research into longitudinal studies involving addiction, recovery, aging, and long-term behavioral health outcomes. What I found was both encouraging and clarifying. There are, in fact, important longitudinal studies examining long-term recovery trajectories over extended periods of time. Studies such as the San Diego Prospective Study, the work of psychiatrist George Valent, and more recent research involving recovery capital and sustained remission have contributed significantly to our understanding of addiction, remission, relapse risk, and long-term behavioral outcomes. Those studies matter. But as I continue reviewing the literature, something became increasingly clear to me. The primary focus of much of this research still centers around understanding why people relapse, what predicts remission, and what factors contributed to sustained abstinence over time. Those are important questions, but they are not the primary focus questions driving my work. My focus increasingly centers somewhere else. What happens to people after decades of sustained recovery as they age? What happens when individuals remain clean and sober for 20, 30, 40, or 50 years and begin confronting the realities of aging itself? What happens when people in long-term recovery begin requiring transportation assistance, home care, care coordination, assisted living support, or nursing level care? What systems currently exist specifically designed to address those realities? That is where I believe the major service gap exists. In one of my earlier discussions, I made a statement that continues to stay with me. Addiction is public. Recovery is invisible. And perhaps that helps explain why I continue referring to this population as the invisible cohort. Society measures addiction, yet negates long-term recovery. It measures crisis, overdose, relapse, incarceration, homelessness, hospitalization, and active pathology. But society spends far less time examining the long-term realities of people who successfully survive addiction and continue aging in recovery across decades. And that population is growing. Many older adults living in long-term recovery are now confronting the same challenges associated with aging across the general population. Mobility limitations, chronic illness, social isolation, declining health, housing instability, and increasing care needs. But they may also carry unique recovery histories. Behavioral health experiences, emotional realities, trauma, grief, and social support structures that traditional aging systems were never fully designed to fully understand. That is where the concepts behind Never Alone Home Care Services and the Aging in Recovery residential model continue to evolve. I increasingly view Never Alone Home Care Services as part of a recovery-informed, aging-in-place continuum designed to help older adults living in long-term recovery remain safely inside their homes and communities for as long as possible through supportive services, workforce development, home care assistance, care coordination, and recovery-informed community support. At the same time, I also recognize that some individuals will eventually require more structured and supportive environments as aging progresses. That is where the aging and recovery residential model begins to emerge, not as a traditional nursing home model and not simply as institutional care, but as a recovery-informed assisted living and long-term supporting care framework specifically designed for older adults living in sustained recovery who may eventually no longer be able to safely live independently within the community. The more I continue researching this issue, the more convinced I become that aging recovery deserves deeper exploration, not simply as a social concern, but potentially as an emerging interdisciplinary field involving social work, gerontology, behavioral health, long-term care, housing, workforce development, and recovery science. Because ultimately, the larger question may no longer be whether people can survive addiction and recover. Increasingly, the question becomes, what happens when people age in recovery? And are our systems truly prepared for the growing population of older adults aging in long-term recovery? That is the conversation I hope to continue helping to build. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe to our videos. This has been Aging in Recovery. If this topic matters to you, please stay with us as we continue to explore this emerging field.